All right, all right, all right. We are moving on to Jacob blessing his children. So he's about to die. He's in the land of Egypt, living under Joseph, who's basically ruling under Pharaoh. He's already blessed Joseph's sons, which is pretty cool. In fact, I think I'm going to make a sermon on that one because it's kind of an overlooked story. But now we're moving on to the rest of Jacob's sons. He knows he's about to die, and he's gathering them around him to bless them and to basically give them some prophecy for their futures, which, shockingly, pretty accurate. Now, I always think, like, the prophecy, does that make it happen? Because, you hear something, and then that's it. It's like one of the prophecies has to do, or a few of them have to do with where they're going to inherit land, where their land will be. And it's their father telling them what land they're going to get. So, of course, that prophecy is going to come true because he's telling them this is what you're going to do. But at the same time, it's kind of like, I hate to be such a nerd and I do this all the time, but it's kind of like if you're a Harry Potter fan and are a nerd about it, there's the thing where Voldemort makes Harry Potter the chosen one because he marks him as his own, because he heard the prophecy that this boy is going to be the chosen one, and so he goes and seek him out, accidentally marking him his own. If he never sought Harry Potter out as a baby to kill him, then he wouldn't have made him into the chosen one. And I sometimes with these prophecies, I wonder how much of that's the case. If the prophecy had never been made, would it have happened? But if the prophecy hadn't been made, it doesn't matter if it would have happened. It's like, is it going to happen anyway, or does the prophecy make it happen? It's kind of crazy when you think about it like that. Anyway, let's get into the reading. Sorry for my nerd moment. All right. Oh, I know there's tons of Bible people who'd be like, Harry Potter and all these fantasy novels, they're bad, it's dark magic, and you know what? As long as you don't read it like it's a Bible, like it's anything other than fiction, there's not much wrong with it whatsoever, as long as you know it's fiction. Just like people who talk about there's symbolism everywhere for the occult and everything. The only people who care about those symbols are the occult. Normal people don't care. And as long as you have your heart turned over to God, it doesn't matter if you see a movie with an occult symbol in it. I mean, the bad part is actually the more and more you learn, the less and less entertaining that all that stuff becomes, and you see the propaganda in it. But if you just look at a fictional book as a fictional book, and you don't look at it as trying to teach you something as far as, a godly world, then you'll be just fine. In fact, it's no different than reading other scriptures outside of the Bible and taking it back to reference points in the Bible, really. Because there are morals and values in a lot of other books. Another tangent. Sorry. All right, moving on. Genesis 49, King James Version. And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. All right, notice how he said, befall you in the last days. So this is what will happen to you in the end. This is where your lines are headed to. Obviously this doesn't mean everyone in your line is going to be good or bad, depending on the blessing, but this is what will befall your lines. And we see it coming true, and what we have to be really aware of is that it's in the last times that all this will be totally fulfilled. All right, Reuben, this is 3, verse 3. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength. Thy excellency of dignity and the excellency of power, unstable as water. Thou shalt not excel. Because you wentest up to thy father's bed, then defiledst thou it. He went up to my couch. He had sex with one of Jacob's concubines. This is what happened. What was it? Genesis 35:22 talks about it. Yeah, he just had sex with one of his dad's concubines. So he's like, even though you're my firstborn, you're not getting much of the blessing here, because that's wrong. But also, it's not just a petty thing. I mean, first of all, Jacob shouldn't have had concubines. But notice how he talks about the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power, unstable as water. Thou shalt not excel. He is his might. He is I don't want to say not good or bad. I'm not going to go there, but he's like a dignified, powerful person. He gains power and dignity, but that's what he seeks, is power and dignity. And it's unstable as water. It's vanity. You're seeking dignity and power, and because of that, you will not excel. Because you're not seeking to serve me, the Lord, you're seeking to have power and dignity in this world. Because of that, your line will not excel, even though you're the firstborn. Because of this power and dignity that's within you, you can't excel. And also, you had sex with my concubine, so you're not getting the heavy inheritance. But notice he doesn't cut them off. He doesn't cut these. So people might think, oh, so that's, they're getting cursed or they're getting left out. No one's left out of the blessing. There's some controversy over Dan, but Revelations 144,000 says they're left out of there, but then Ezekiel, they're left in. So I'm not going to get into that till we get to it. But for the most part, Reuben's not cut off from the blessing. He just doesn't get the majority portion because his line will be like him. They will seek dignity and they'll seek power, but they won't always seek to serve the Lord. All right. And that's a good message. Unstable as water. You don't have any real ground to stand on if those are the things you're seeking in life. If those are the things you want in life. If you want power in this world, if you want people, dignity and people to look up to you, but that's all you want, you're not on anything firm. You haven't built your house on a firm foundation of serving the Lord. Verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in the habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly mine honor. Be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. All right, so remember when Delilah, the sister, the daughter of Jacob, Simeon and Levi's sister, was raped. Remember, this is a whole big long video I made. They tricked the people, the whole tribe, the community under the prince that raped their sister, and slaughtered them. First tricked them, then slaughtered them. And Jacob is coming back around. I said it would. He's telling him that was wrong. He told him at the time it was wrong, and now he's telling him, look, you guys will not get much of the blessing. You're not cut off, but I'm cutting it way back, and God's cutting it way back because you acted out of anger. Remember, we talked about the difference between justice and revenge. There is a time to kill, but you must do it for justice sake. If you're doing it out of your own anger and revenge, even if it is a just thing, this person raped your sister, but if you're doing it out of revenge and anger, it's wrong. You have to do it out of justiceness and righteousness, which is what Jacob was coming to do. But his sons had beat him to there and done it out of anger and slaughtered this village of people. And he's saying, because of and cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And this happens. The Levites become the priests, and they have no home, really. They travel around, or they have assigned places, but they're serving Israel as priests. They don't really inherit anything. And Simeon, the same thing. His line becomes very scattered, and they're one of the weakest tribes throughout the Bible, especially near the end of, was it before Babylon takes them over? Anyway, they're one of the weakest and most scattered tribes. And again, it's another warning. Don't let your anger control you. Be just, be righteous. Don't be revengeful. Don't be angry, and don't let your anger make you into a fierce sinner. Moving on. Verse 8. All right, I'm switching over to another translation real quick. This is the New International Version. Sorry, but it's just easier to read. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son, like a lion who crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nation shall be his. Now, King James, I'm going to read that part, verse 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Shiloh. Let me make sure. Yeah, Shiloh means like peace. So basically what it's talking about here, we know that Judah's line becomes David's line, which is the kings of Israel, and not from, but first it compares him to a lion. He started out as a lion's whelp, young and strong. He moves on to be a stalker of prey. And then it also compares him to a lioness who protects her cubs. This is Judah. And also, moving on, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. So he's going to be a protector. He's going to be a ruler. He's going to be fiercely strong. Judah is compared his strength in the Bible to a lion. And I've told you how it's written in non-canonical texts, like the Testimony of the Patriarchs, that he had an angel of God looking over him in battle and stuff. So Judah is fierce, Judah is strong, and we talked about this earlier when he's seduced by the harlot, who turns out to be his daughter-in-law, how he comes full circle. Like, he doesn't start out as the best of a man, but he learns from his mistakes, and he has one of the fullest arcs, at least of any of the 12 patriarchs. You know, Joseph has an arc, but it's not very full because he starts out quite good, you know, maybe a little cocky, but quite good. Judah starts out pretty bad, and he comes full arc, you know, with his storyline, and he learns a lot from it, and it makes him into a great person who wants to teach lessons to his children so that they don't have to go through what he went through. They don't have to learn the hard way. They don't have to do the evils that he did. And that's why his line becomes so powerful, because of his fierce knowledge of what it is to do wrong and to learn from it. So he teaches his line this, and they become the rulers of the land, and all the lawgivers will be under them until Christ comes, until Shiloh comes, until he whom it belongs shall come. And then all nations will do obedience to him. So until Christ comes, Judah's line will be the kings. They will be the ones over the law. They will be the ones that make sure the law is just and distributed justly. They will be the rulers, the protectors of Israel, which we see ends up happening. And again, does this end up happening because of the prophecy was said, so therefore all of Israel's descendants know that it has to be a son of Judah that inherits the kingdom? Or did Jacob just know it was going to happen because God was giving him prophecy? Which one causes the other? It's always kind of crazy to me, but we do know that that happens. All right. By the way, there's a ton of obvious reference to Christ. Like Shiloh, until he come. Judah will be in charge until Shiloh come, where all the nations will do obedience to him. We'll see more of that. Verse 11. Binding his fowl unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine, he washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red wine, and his teeth white with milk. So Judah gets fertile land, is basically what this is saying. He's going to have very fertile land. He's going to have a lot of livestock and wealthy vineyards and growing fruits and vegetables, and it'll be very fertile land is what he will inherit, which again we end up seeing come true. Verse 13. Zebulun shall dwell in the haven of the sea, and he shall be for an haven of ships, and his brother shall be unto Zidon. Okay, again, this is what I'm saying about prophecy happening because prophecy was said. He's telling him exactly where he's going to inherit land. You know, obviously his line ends up having a seaport. It's on the Mediterranean, and well, there's another body of water that they're up against, and a lot of seaports. And Zidon is the land of the Canaanites, is the capital of the Canaanites. And those are the border on the other side, predicting exactly where he's going to live. But is he predicting it, or is he telling him this is where you're going to live, and then that's exactly where he lives because Jacob predicted it? And he's the father, and he's the one they are like, we got to listen to him. But that's all it is. They're just predicting that, you know, you'll have a seaport, you'll be near the Canaanites. All right, verse 14. Ishkar is strong ass, couching down between two burdens, and he saw the rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulders to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. Again, because of the land that Ishtar and his descendants end up having, they end up always having to pay tribute. Because they're surrounded by so many people, there's not enough fertility or seaports for trade or anything like that. They're never able to really have a lot of power, so they have to pay tribute and kind of be a beast of burden, comparing him to an ass. Like, he's strong, but he's not strong enough to be independent in any sort of way or to kind of be on its own. It always has to be obedient to those around him, because an ass is a beast of burden. It's not one that's going to fight back against you or anything like that. Again, does the prophecy happen because he said it would, and they're like, we have to follow what our father said? Or does it happen because Jacob knew it was going to happen? Or is it both? I tend to think it's both. All right, moving on. Verse 16. This is the tribe of Dan. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that the rider shall fall backwards. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. We'll come back to that verse. That was 18. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. But let's look at this about Dan, because Dan's kind of an interesting tribe. So one more time. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heel, so that riders shall fall backwards. All right, so we do know that Dan produced a lot of judges. One of the most famous ones is Samson. So every little boy's hero from the Bible, because he's super strong and has a long mullet. You know, he has a mullet. So, good prediction or prophecy. We know that they do judge their people, especially before they get kings. The line of Dan has a lot of prominent judges. Dan shall be a serpent, by the way. So this was a pretty troublesome or rowdy, leading their brothers down the wrong path type of tribe. They were notorious for leading the Israelites into idolatry, like you'll see it in Judges 18. And one of the Jeroboam, I think, set up one of his idolatrous golden calves. That was in 1 King. And later Dan became the center of idol worship. And this is in Amos. So again, this tribe of Dan keeps kind of leading them down the wrong path. And I think a lot of it has to do with, prior to the kings being there, they had a lot of power. They were the judges. You know, we can distribute justice, and we can tell you whether you're doing right or wrong. And after the kings come along, they lose a lot of this power. And I think they end up trying to seek that power through other means, like idol worship and leading people towards the wrong way, because they can start their own sort of religion where people have to listen to them all over again, versus now there's kingdoms and kings and prophets, and they don't have as much power since the judge system is out of the window. The serpent, by the way, a lot of people, and they're most likely right, think this refers to the Antichrist, and that it will come from the tribe of Dan. Now, we don't really know exactly what happens to the tribe of Dan. There's a lot of theories, but they're one of those tribes that really gets distributed and dispersed quite a bit. A lot of people think that Dan's tribe will have the seed of the serpent, will have the Antichrist in it. But you got to understand the thing with the Antichrist. The Antichrist is gonna have so much pedigree. Like, they'll say he's related to Judah, Dan, Jesus, probably. They'll say he's related to Jesus, like David. And maybe he will be. A lot of these lineages do like to intermarry and keep the lines as pure blood or as prestigious as possible. So the Antichrist will have pedigree, and it probably will include the tribe of Dan. I mean, it's just pretty obvious. I mean, this is based on Daniel 11 and Jeremiah 8. So, not that that's important, because you don't know who's really a tribe of Dan member or not. So it's not really important, but it's just prophecy. Like, this is going to happen, and it just shows how this is the word of God, because look how accurate I am. Dan is left out of the listing tribes in Revelations, where it talks about the 144,000, but Dan is the first tribe listed in Ezekiel's millennial roll call in Ezekiel 48. So again, I think that has to do with God's redemption. Because again, I don't think, obviously not everyone in each one of these families is going to be, all of them are going to be super good leaders like Judah. Obviously, look at some of the kings that came in Israel. And not all of them are going to be vipers and adders in the line of Dan. But that's just the way that those majority of those tribes are going to go. But obviously, even though they're left out in the 144,000, I tend to think it shows God's redemption for those that turn back to him or still call on him. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But this is one of my favorite verses right here in this chapter. So he takes like a moment after talking about Dan. You have to understand he's kind of like seeing, you know, this is not that this is his necessarily worst son, but he sees a serpent coming from this line. And afterwards he says, I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. Now, the Hebrew word for salvation is Yeshua. Sound familiar? That's also a name for Jesus. So whether he knew it or not, I tend to think Jacob knew it. He cries out right there, I have waited for your salvation, Jesus. I've waited for you. I mean, that's pretty powerful, I think. Thought somebody pulled up. So he just gets done telling Dan that his line is going to have some serpents in it. They'll start out as judges and then end up not being too good. And he says, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. And it's because he's about to die, but it's also because in this prophecy, I tend to think he's seeing the end. At the very beginning, it says, in the last days. This is what will befall you in the last days. And here in Dan, he talks about probably the Antichrist, which means that Christ comes and defeats the Antichrist. I tend to think that he sees this, and that's why he's like, long have I waited your salvation, Christ. He not only sees that this serpent seed coming from Dan's tribe will happen, but he also sees the salvation that comes from Yeshua. All right, verse 19. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome it at the last. Now all this is referring to is Gad. They have a lot of good warriors. They provide a lot of them to David and everything. And I think it's in Jeremiah and other ones. They keep losing battles and being like beat up on, but they end up overcoming in the end. And it's just a good metaphor for your Christian life. You know, you're going to face adversity. You're going to feel like you're losing. You're going to feel like you're losing. But in the end, you're going to come out a winner so long as you stay close to God. You're going to win in the end. Even with everything in life bombarding you. Shouldn't have done that. But everything that comes at you in life, you can overcome it with God. And in the end, you will win. Just as he shall, and Gad here, he shall triumph at last. Gad, a troop shall tramp upon him, but he shall triumph at last. So you will be trampled on, but in the end, you will win. As long as you have God. All right, I know I'm kind of rushing through this, but there's not a whole lot to go over, I think. I mean, it's pretty to the point with a lot of this stuff. People want to overthink a lot of these prophecies, but it's just write what it says, basically. All right. Verse 20. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. So Asher becomes very wealthy. Wealthy, I guess. They are able to produce and grow and make a lot of luxurious items. So they shall yield royal dainties. So things that kings and princes and royalty want in their castle or in their city or in their possession. A lot of it will be produced in Asher, and it comes true. So they have royal dainties that they produce for people, like fine oils and things like that. All right, Naphtali is a hind let loose. He giveth goodly words. So, I think we had to know to understand what the heck this is talking about. Naphtali is the area where Christ did most of his preaching. So when it says, he giveth goodly words. Naphtali is a hind, or it's a deer, let loose. He giveth goodly words. Christ did most of his preachings around this area where Naphtali is. And this is why it's very befitting, this line right here. Goodly words. Christ went around, he didn't write anything, he just preached the word. He was the word. And this is where it was preached at, is in the land of Naphtali. A deer let loose. Alright, so here's the long one. This is Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bow by a well. His branches run over the wall. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him and hated him. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, by the God of your father, who will help you, and by the Almighty, who will bless you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestry, up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. Alright, kind of a long one, but Joseph was his favorite, so makes sense, right? First of all, fruitful by the well. Understand, Joseph always walked with God. He always sought to serve God. He always tried to think of an issue out and try to come to God. He wasn't perfect, but he always kept God close to him. And that's what it's talking about. A fruitful bow by the well. What's the well? The well is God. It's the Holy Spirit. It's walking with God. It's being close to God. Now, he's a bow of flowers, this beautiful, fruitful crop that's growing right next to the well, next to the oasis. It's feeding him and making him fruitful. What's feeding him? His relationship with God. God is the well. You become fruitful and beautiful and wonderful when you keep a strong connection to God. You're constantly walking with him, talking with him, trying to serve him, and keeping him foremost in your life. And that's what will make you fruitful, and that's what makes Joseph fruitful. And that's what gives him his blessing. You know, again, the blessing is more than just being blessed. You have to understand what's important in this world, how to live for God. Then you get the blessing. You have to understand what the blessing is in order to receive the blessing. And it talks about, you know, the archers have bitterly grieved him and all of his branches. You know, it's because Joseph's being attacked. I mean, Jesus Louise, his brothers sold him into slavery, probably beat him up a little bit. Potiphar's wife accused him of rape. He was thrown in prison. Like, he's been knocked down quite a few times in his life, but it doesn't matter because he always stayed close to God. So it didn't matter how many archers bitterly grieved him and shot and hated his fruitful bow. He was still able to overcome it because he was with God at all times. Very cool, right? Moving on. What else did I have on that one? Yeah, and so it talks about his hands being given strength by God Almighty. God's giving him the strength that he needs to hold on to get through. Because he's close to God, God strengthens him through the hard times. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors. Jacob sees, obviously, look how many children Isaac had, not many. Look how many children Abraham had, not many. Look at how many children Jacob has, a lot. Look at them now. They're in this fruitful land. They're all doing well. They're making it through the famine. His son has come back to him that he thought was dead. He realizes that the blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors. I've been even more blessed than my ancestors. But for a lot of his life, he wasn't aware of this. You know, he kind of thought that he kept, Esau drove me away, and I had to work extra years for Laban and all this stuff. But he's seeing now that, no, this is a blessing. God's blessed me far beyond my father or my father's father. All right. Uh-oh. Computer was dying. I better go get the charger. But notice that he calls God by 5 different names. So first one is the mighty God of Jacob. The next one is the shepherd. Then the stone of Israel. Then the God of your father, the Almighty. Alright, so this is much better than when Jacob referred to God as the God of Abraham or the fear of his father Isaac. He's come to realize what God truly is, what God truly represents. And because he's realizing this, and I had to go upstairs to get that, it shows that Jacob's made a full arc. Now remember, Jacob saw God differently in his youth than he does here. He sees God now as the shepherd, as this blessed giver of the stone of Israel, instead of fear of his father Isaac, or just simply the God of Abraham. So remember, Abraham, a godly man, but he was one of the first patriarchs, the first patriarch of the post-flood. And he just came to an understanding of what God is. That there's one God, a creator God. There's not all these polytheistic false gods out there. There's one true God who's a creator God who loves us. Isaac feared God, which is good. You need to have fear of God. That's why he walked in his ways, because he feared him. Which kind of makes sense, because God almost had Abraham kill Isaac. So you can understand why Isaac walked in fear of the Lord. But Jacob, he now sees far more of what God is than his father or his father's father. He sees him as the Almighty, the shepherd who's going to watch over his flock and cares for him. He sees him as the mighty God of Israel, the stone of Israel, the thing that you have to build your foundation on, the hard point, the thing that completes it. He's come to a far greater understanding of God than his fathers did before him. And it just grows with time. All right, verse 27. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. One thing you need to know about Benjamin and his line is they are fierce. So you'll see this in like 1 Samuel or in Judges, and also in Acts written by Paul, I think. But the cruelty of the Benjamites becomes quite legendary, especially Judges 19 and 20. So just understand that. Benjamites, I mean, they kind of fall under the Levi and Simeon thing later on, but this is just a prediction, which is weird because Benjamin, from the way the Bible's written, is very, not shy, but very peaceful, the youngest one, doesn't cause a big stir, but his tribe becomes ravenous as wolves. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. So we'll see it later on how this becomes fulfilled. Just know that it becomes true. They become quite fierce and kind of cruel in their reputation as warriors and as a people. Genesis 28. All right, this is the death of Jacob. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is it that their father spake unto them, and blessed them, every one according to his blessing he blessed them. And he charged them, and he said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers, and in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Malchapah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought, and with the field of Ephron the Hittite for possession of a burying place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The purchase of the field and the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. And when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet unto his bed, and yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. Alright, first off, what I want to say is, you ever have a conversation with an older person, or like your grandma or grandpa, and they're always like, oh yeah, that's that place down the road, and you turn south by the old Thompson farm. You know, the one that they sold to the berries. Yeah, and the berries, they brought in that house over there that Sam the mechanic used to own. You know, they drove it out there. It was this big deal. Anyway, you go on past that and you'll get to the corner where we used to live with your... That's what I feel like when I'm reading this. Look how descriptive Abraham gets. Like, why didn't you just say, hey, bury me in the field where my father's buried? You know, the one that Abraham purchased, where Leah and all these people are buried. No, he goes into detail. The bot from Heth, and the son of the Hittite, and the land of Ephron, field of Melchapah, the place where they were buried. Like, he goes into this way unnecessary detailed description, and it just reminds me of when you talk to an older person, how they're just way more detailed than they need to be when they're describing how to get to a place or where somewhere's located or telling you a story. It's like, okay, yeah, no, I got it. But the one thing you need to understand with this last part here is that Jacob was in Egypt. Joseph was number 2 below Pharaoh. Jacob was his father. Egypt had elaborate, amazing, wonderful tombs. He could have been buried with prestige in one of these grand tombs in Egypt. He didn't want to. He knew his land was the land of Canaan. This was the blessed land. This is where they were promised to be, and he was going to be buried there. Not only because he wanted to be buried with his fathers, but also because it's a reminder of his line that this is your home. Your home isn't in Egypt. You have to come out and back to the land of Canaan eventually. This is what God promised, and we have to uphold our end of the promise, which is to take possession of the land. Alright, so this was the blessing of the 12 sons of Jacob. Sorry, I had to go get my charger in the middle of it. There's a lot of things to unwrap about it. We already went over a lot of them. Understand that these prophecies are incredibly accurate, but also understand that they're a prediction of the last days. This is what's going to happen in the end days. These things will come to total fruition in the end. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, all this stuff already came true. And it is accurate. This stuff did come true. But it's going to still be true in the end. This is end times prophecy. This is clearly prophecy because it comes true. So you know a prophet by whether or not they say comes true, by their acts, by what happens with what they say. If what they say comes to fruition, that's the word of God. These things come to fruition. So this is the word of God. But one of the first things said is, let me tell you of what shall befall you in the last days. So this stuff is coming again. But there's tons of good warnings for us to understand. Don't be someone who settles like Issachar and is constantly paying tribute to other people. Don't be someone who falls into revenge and living for anger instead of living for justice like Simeon and Levi. Don't be someone who is like Dan, who's a burden to your fellow man because you're constantly leading him down the wrong path. Don't be ravenous like Benjamin. A lot of it's don't be's, I know. Reuben's a good one. Reuben might be the best one. Don't live for power and dignity. Don't live for your vanity. Don't live for this world. Live for God. Reuben was the firstborn. He should have gotten basically what Judah got, but he didn't get it. He had sex with his dad's concubine. But because he lived, and it says right here, you live for excellency of dignity and excellency of power. But these are unstable as water, and you shall not excel. Because you can't excel if you're living for these things. It's like having a foundation built on water. You know, you're on a boat. You're constantly rocking. You have to have a firm foundation, living for God, living for truth, justice, righteousness, living for love and for the God Almighty. Alright, so we're getting through Genesis. We're almost done. I know this is one of my longer ones. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. And everyone have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or good night. God bless.